What's up everyone, it's Blue here at Blue Bears Games, and today I will be showing you the final deck that was custom ordered but not paid for. As in all the previous decks that suffered this fate, I have revamped it to fit into my $40 budget commander deck precon offerings. The commander that was requested was Abomination of Llanowar, which is a 1 green, 1 black, and 1 generic mana legendary elf horror with vigilance, menace, and a power and toughness that is equal to the number of elves both in play and in your graveyard. It should be obvious that the customer wanted an elf tribal deck, and I thought I was lucky with the request because I was in the process of building this anyway. I actually started building this before the Elven Empire precon was announced, but I put it on the back burner when Wizards announced they were going to make the Elven Empire precon. The request gave me an opportunity to finally finish the build since I had a buyer lined up so my time wouldn't be wasted. The joke was on me though, as this ended up being the third deck from the same person to not get purchased. So now, the deck I'm about to show you will be added to my Commander Precon offerings for $40. I want to point out that this build does have a lot of similarities to the Elven Empire Precon, but I've added a couple of things to make them quite different from each other. I also want to point out that when I went online to search for an Elven Empire Precon, the lowest price I could find for a sealed package was almost double my price at $75. Just some food for thought. Now, onto the deck. So the land base is a very budget version of the Golgari swath that you want to look at. We're on tribal deck, so Path of Ancestry was a pretty good inclusion here. It enters tapped, which is a bad thing, but it adds a color of any mana that your commander's identity is, and then when you use that mana to cast a creature that shares a creature type with your commander, you get to scry 1, which is always good because when you don't have card draw, scrying is the next best option. And then we're going to go through some budget-style dual lands like Foul Orchard, Golgari Guildgate, Jungle Hollow for that extra life, Witherbloom Campus for more scrying, because again, scrying is the next best option next to drawing. Thriving Rove, and then of course Thriving Moor. You're going to choose the opposite one. Skemfar Elder Hall. So it's not a dual land. It actually enters tapped and only taps to add green. But for 2 generic black and 2 green, you can sacrifice it, and up to 1 target creature you don't control gets -2/-2 until end of turn. And you create 2 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens, and you can only activate that as a sorcery. It's a way to possibly get rid of something on your opponent's side, and you gain 2 elves, so it's always nice. And then the rest of it's going to be basic. It's going to be forests and then swamps. I always tell you at this section, I don't remember how many of each I have in there, so the link to the deck list will be in the description of the video, so you can check it out. Normally, I would move on to the ramp section. However, this deck is elves, and ramp is in the creatures. So we don't have ramp spells in this, and we don't have mana rocks. We have a really large selection of elves, and most of them give you mana. So you see the basic ones that you always see: Llanowar Elves, Fintorn Elves, and Elvish Mystic. Great options for that. They're one to cast mana dorks. Elves of the Deep Shadow. It's another one, but this one taps to add a black to your mana pool instead of green like the other 3 elves do. So it deals damage to you as well, but that's nominal. Elvish Visionary for some card draw. Paradise Druid. Protected mana dork, so it has hexproof as long as it's untapped. Oops. Druid of the Cow, another mana dork. It's a 1/3 though. Gem Palm Strider, so it's a 2 to cast 2/2, and you can cycle it for 4. And when you cycle it, elves you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. So if later in the game you want to do a swarm, a token swarm, or a go wide option, Gem Palm Strider can be cycled, so you discard it and draw a card, and then all of your elves get +2/+2. Rosethorn Acolyte, it's a 3 to cast 2/3 mana dork, but it has an adventure, so you can cast it for 1. So if early on in the game, for some reason you only have green mana, you can actually pay the green to get the black if you have something that you need that's got black and its mana cost to put out. Numa, Jiraga Chieftain. So one of the cool options here is that this deck can actually be multiple different styles of decks. So we're already going to do either a go wide theme, or you can do a Voltron theme, because Abomination can be a Voltron, and especially with Numa out, or you can go wide with all of the elves because you can buff them all. So Numa can also be one of the partners for the other partners that I have in this deck that are black, so you can change the deck up a little bit to make it partners instead. So Numa says at the beginning of your turn you may pay double X. Double X means that for every 2 mana you put into it, you get 1 out. And when you do, you distribute X +1/+1 counters amongst any number of other elves, right? I'm sorry, target elves. It can actually be Numa. The reason why that's really good is because if you use Abomination and you're doing a Voltron thing, all that mana that all your dorks provide, you can pump that into putting counters on Abomination of Llanowar, and then make that card very beefy and possibly get your 21 commander damage in. Llanowar Visionary, so this is a combination card of like Elvish Visionary and Llanowar Elves. So it actually is a combination. So it's 3 to cast for a 2/2. That when it enters play, you draw a card and it can tap to add a green. So if you look at Visionary, it's a 2 to cast 1/1 that lets you draw a card. And if you look at Llanowar Elves, it's a 1 to cast 1/1 that taps to add a green. It's literally the combination. Silkweaver Elite, 3 to cast 2/2 with Reach, which is important because we don't have any flying in this deck. And then it has Revolt, which says that when it enters play, if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, you can draw a card. I tried to find ways to draw cards in here. This was one of them. Timberwatch Elf follows that Voltron theme again. It's a 3 to cast 1/2 that you can tap to give target creature +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of elves on the battlefield. So you can do Voltron with Abomination, and if you have a whole bunch of elves out, finding ways to give Abomination trample, since it already has, Menace and, what's the other one? Menace and Vigilance. If you can give it trample, that means that you can get damage through. So it's not bad. It's good options. Reclamation Sage is utility. It's a 3 to cast 2/1 that destroys an artifact or enchantment when it enters play. Imperious Perfect is an Anthem creature, 3 to cast 2/2 that gives all other elves +1/+1, but it's also one of those ones that can help you with your go wide option, where it can create 1/1 elf tokens that get buffs. So technically it's creating 2/2s, but they're 1/1 base. Champion of Llanowar is actually a partial win con. It's a 3 to cast 1/1 that says creatures with power less than Champion of Llanowr's power can't block any creature you control. So the higher Champion of Llanowr's power is, the less things that can block your dudes, all right? And then whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on Champion of Llanowr, making Champion bigger and bigger and bigger, making less and less creatures on your opponent's side being able to block. That's always good. It's a partial win con. I say partial because some people play with really big creatures, so it's partial. Elvish Archdruid, 3 to cast 2/2 that is an Anthem that gives all your other elves +1/+1, and taps to add a green to add a green to your mana pool equal to number of elves you control. Llanowar Tribe, 3 to cast 3/3, taps to add 3 green. Pretty simple. It's a mana dork. Elegant Entourage, 4 to cast 4/4 that has Alliance. That says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, target creature other than Elegant Entourage gets +1/+1 and trample until end of turn. This is in here because if you're doing the Voltron theme, he can actually buff, or it, I don't know, it's an elf druid, but it looks like it's an entourage. They, I guess you could say, will give Abomination a buff and the trample that you're looking for to get damage through. Lissalana Huntmaster, 4 to cast 3/3 that whenever you cast an elf, it's cast, not whenever something comes into play, it's an elf, you have to cast it. You may create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Go wide theme. Wild Heart Invoker, it's a mana sink that does work. It's a 4 to cast 4/3 that for every 8 you put into it, you can give a creature you control, or actually any creature, +5/+5 and trample. So there's that Voltron theme, but you actually can also use this with the go wide theme, because if you're buffing a lot of different things, then you have more chances of damage going through, plus it gives them trample. Thornbow Archer, it's a 1 to cast 1/2 that whenever it attacks, each opponent who doesn't control an elf loses a life, so it's a little bit of a drainage. It drains life total slowly. Blight Soul Druid, it's a mana dork, it's a 2 to cast 1/2 that you have to pay a life to add a green. Miara, Thorn of the Glade, is one of the options for partner. This is one of the other things you can do with the deck where you have the green partner and a black partner. When Miara, Thorn of the Glade, or another elf you control dies, you may pay 1 generic mana and 1 life to draw a card. So it hurts, but that's what black does. But you gain resources, which is very important. This is one of the draw engines I have in here, because you have a lot of creatures in here. This deck has, I think, 37 creatures, so you should have plenty of card draw. Guiltleaf Winnower is a 5 to cast 4/3 with Menace. That is removal. When it enters the battlefield, you destroy a non-elf creature with power and toughness that are not the same or equal. Hunter of Eyeblights, 5 to cast 3/3. When it comes into play, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature that you don't control. And then it has a cool ability that for 3 and tap it, you can destroy a creature with a counter on it. And that's pretty good, because there are a lot of people who like to play with +1/+1 counter shenanigans. So this is actually good removal. It's a repeatable removal. Thorn Mantle Striker. It's a 5 to cast 4/3 that when it enters, you can choose one of the following. You can remove X counters from target permanent, or you can give target creature -X/-X, where X is equal to number of elves that you control. So depending on what's going on, this says permanent, so you can the counters can be removed from planeswalkers as well. So it's actually either creature removal or it could be planeswalker removal. Nadir, Agent of Duskend, is the other option as a partner, so you can pair that with Numa. It's 6 to cast for a 3/3, and then whenever a token you control leaves the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then when Nadir leaves the battlefield, you create a number of 1/1 elf warrior creature tokens equal to its power. So there's a lot of synergy here with Numa. So if you do partners, I would suggest Nadir with Numa. Llanowar Dead, a mana dork, 2 to cast 2/2 that adds black. Shaman of the Pack can actually be a player remover. It's 3 to cast for a 3/2 that when it enters the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control. Depending on the board state, and if your opponent's playing board wipes, any of your opponents are playing them. If they're not, you could have a massive horde that this could actually remove somebody from the game. Twin Blade Assassins is a 5 to cast 5/4 that is a card draw engine. I've said it many times in other videos. Commander is starting to need repeatable card draw. This is the way I did it. Twin Blade Assassin says that at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, draw a card. It's only one card, I get that. But if every time you get a turn, something dies, you get to draw a card. That's double your draw power because you draw at the beginning of your turn and then at the end of your turn. So, and those are the elves. I've got a couple of non-elves that are utility. All right. Lesser Masticore is a mana sink. It's a 2 to cast 2/2 that you have to discard a card to cast it. But for every 4 you put into it, you can deal damage to a creature. That's good because you can create a lot of mana in this deck. So you can also use this as ways to board wipe your opponents only. It also has Persist, which means that if it dies, it comes back at least once. So it comes into play with a -1/-1 counter, and then it's just a 1/1. But it's really good for mana sink and wiping other people's boards out, especially if you're going up against a token deck that's all 1/1s. Vampire Opportunist. So this is the third option to win with this deck, because this deck has 3. All that mana needs mana sinks. Why not throw that into a vampire that drains your opponents and gives you life? So it's 2 to cast 2/1 that for every 7 you put into it, each opponent will lose 2 life and you will gain 2 life. The amount of mana that you can create should be enough that this is worth it, because you should be able to create a lot of mana, especially with the one that gives you green for every elf you control. If you have a bunch of elves out, say you have 20 elves out, there's 20 mana from just one thing being tapped. So for every 7 you put into it, each opponent will lose 2 life and you gain 2 life. And then I put some redundancy, not as good redundancy, but it's redundancy nonetheless, with Spectre of the Fens, because it's a 4 to cast 2/3 flyer that for every 6 you put into it, target opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. Endray's Forerunners is the win con for the go wide strategy. It's the Poor Man's Craterhoof Behemoth. It's a 8 to cast 7/7 Vigilance, Trample, Haste creature that when it enters the battlefield, other creatures you control get +2/+2 Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. So it's to buff all of your guys for one big swing. And that's the creature section. I'm going to move on now to utility. The utility section is broken up into 3 sections. It's going to be card draw, removal, and then other. All right. So we start off with card draw. Things like Adventurous Impulse are not card draw per se, but they put cards in your hand, so I put them in that category. So Adventurous Impulse lets you look at the top 3 cards of your library, and then you can reveal a creature or land from among them and put it into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library. The rest of them will be similar. Seek the Wilds does it with you can look at 4 cards, and then Shamanic Revelation is probably the star card draw card in this deck. 5 to cast, it lets you draw a card for each creature you control. We're an elf tribal horde with token creation and all that fun stuff, so you should be able to draw a shit ton of cards. And then it has Ferocious, which says you gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater, and that's important in this deck because I have a bunch of Anthem-style creatures in here, so those 1/1s could be 4/4s, and then you could gain a lot of life. Then we got Black's card draw spells. They're all something that says player draws 2 cards, you lose 2 life, so we've got Sign in Blood, Foreboding Fruit, which also gives you a food token if needed, Painful Lessons, as you can see, they're all the same, and Succumb to Temptation. Not repeatable card draw, but I did the best I could. Then we got some removal stuff. So this section's a little thicker because this deck is basically, it's a tribal deck, let's just be honest. It's elf tribal, but then it has nothing really else other than being able to remove things because we're in black. So, Feed the Swarm destroys a creature or an enchantment. Eye Blight's Ending destroys a non-elf creature. Obviously, that's just flavor. Complete Disregard exiles a creature with power 3 or less, and I like the exile part of this, that's why I chose this. It's instant speed, and I like exiling things because you never know how people can bring things back from the grave. Murder is just iconic. Eviscerate destroys a creature. Feed the Serpent exiles a creature or a planeswalker, so extra things here we can destroy planeswalkers. Mage Hunter's Onslaught is actually the star of the show here as far as removal goes. It destroys a creature or a planeswalker for 4, but it also has whenever a creature blocks its turn, its controller loses a life. So if you attack with a big swarm, they still might lose life anyway. Overwhelming Remorse, it's 5 to cast to exile a creature or planeswalker. However, it costs 1 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard, and since we are a pretty hefty tribal deck with a lot of creatures, you may have a bunch in the graveyard, so it might end up being 1 to cast. That's an instant too. Desperate destroys a creature and then actually ramps you. It helps you search for a basic land card and put it on the battlefield. Golden Demise gives all creatures -2/-2 until end of turn. However, it also has Ascend, which means if you have 10 or more permanents on the board, you gain the City's Blessing. And then if you have the City's Blessing, instead it gives all of your opponent's creatures -2/-2. Eye Blight Massacre. Non-elf creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Good one-sided board wipe. Naturalize for artifact and enchantment removal. Return to nature, same thing. Reclaiming Vines, because I like to put a little bit of land destruction in every deck. This is the way I do it now with green. It destroys an artifact, enchantment, or land if you need to. And then Golgari Charm, not necessary. It's a Swiss Army knife here. It's not just removal. It's either giving creatures -1/-1 until end of turn, which could be useful. Destroying an enchantment, which obviously is useful. And then the other thing is Combat Tricks.
You can also choose to, instead of, you only get to choose one, remember, to regenerate each creature you control. So you can swarm in with a whole bunch of things, get some damage in, and everybody thinks they have the advantage because they've killed all your guys, but you can Golgari Charm to regenerate each one of them. And the last part of the utility is just pure utility stuff that's fun and helps aid the deck. Elven Ambush, it's 4 to cast sorcery that creates a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token for each elf you already control. Shadows of the Past is the mana sink and another win con. So, it's a 2 to cast enchantment that whenever a creature dies, not just yours, but any creature dies, you scry 1. Always good to be able to move around stuff from your deck when you need to. But for 5, and this is every 5, there's a colon there, not a tap symbol, not a comma, it's literally just 5. For every 5 you put into it, just like the Vampire Opportunist, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, but you can only activate that if there are 4 or more creatures in your graveyard. This is a deck that should probably have 4 creatures in the graveyard by the time you get this out and start using it to full effect, alright? This is a win con because it's cheaper than the Opportunist. The Opportunist, I believe, was 7. This is only 5, so you can get extra uses or extra activations out of it. So, good option for this deck. Roaring Earth is something I'm playing with right now. I like the card a lot. I don't care about the channel ability, it's the landfall ability. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on target creature or vehicle, but that doesn't matter, that you control. I like being able to build up my dudes on my side, especially my commander, if we're going to go with a Voltron beam, to make it bigger and bigger and bigger, and do it for free since you have to play a land anyway. Guys, the Anthem is literally an anthem. It gives all your creatures you control +1/+1. Overrun is the in addition to Endray's Forerunners as a go wide win con. It gives all your creatures +3/+3 and trample until the turn. Pride of the Perfect. It's an enchantment that gives all elves you control +2/+0. You can see the buffs there. Death Ritual is my other way of giving you repeatable card draw. It's a 4 to cast enchantment with Morbid, and the Morbid is at the beginning of each end step now. This is everybody's turn. If a creature died this turn, you may draw a card. This is the best card draw card in this deck. And the last thing is going to be protection for your commander, especially if you're going Voltron theme, you're going to need this. It says equipped creature gets +0/+2 and hexproof. And then also whenever a creature with Death Touch blocks or becomes blocked by this creature, that creature also dies. Don't care about that. It's a 2 to cast equipment that costs 2 to equip that gives your commander or anything else that may be important on the board hexproof.
And there you have it, folks. Abomination of Llanowar, Elf Tribal on a budget. While I was sad that both the person who ordered it backed out, and that as I was making it a while ago, Wizards of the Coast put out the Elven Empire precon, I'm glad that I finally got to finish it and add it to my precon offerings. Elves are always a fun deck, and with 3 ways to win, I'm sure whoever purchases this in the future will really enjoy it. Starting next week and going through the rest of the summer, I will be making videos about my own personal builds for the first time since September of 2021. These will not be budget decks like I usually do, but these will all be part of the 32 deck challenge that I decided to take part of a couple of years ago. So, join me as I start that next Friday, but stick around and watch the videos of the decks I've already done for the challenge in the My Personal MTG deck section of the channel. If you don't know what the 32 deck challenge is, just ask in the comments and I will explain it further to you. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and as always, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or concerns, or you just want to talk or chat about any of the videos I put out, you can do so using any of the methods I have displayed here. Additionally, if you would like to support the channel, you can do so in 3 ways. Donations are accepted and greatly appreciated. I have 3 methods with which you can do so displayed on the screen, and keep in mind that no amount is too small. If donations aren't your thing, and you would like to get something for your money, that's great too. I sell a lot of the decks I present on the channel, as well as mystery packs. So, if you're interested in any of these, you can contact me using the information I have up on your screen right now. Directly contacting me is usually the best and cheapest way to do so, but you can always look at what I currently have available on the Facebook Marketplace. And lastly, if you want to show your love and support for the channel, but like myself, are a little strapped for cash, it doesn't cost you anything to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, watch some videos and give them a like, and possibly share them out on your social medias you use to help spread my content to more people. No matter what way you choose is greatly appreciated and will help support the channel, and I thank you for it. Sadly, that is all the time I have for this video. Thank you for watching, and please, stick around and watch some of the many great videos I've posted over the last few years, and remember to check back again for new content I'll be posting every week. Have a great day.